So, you thought you could sneak off, file for divorce and strip me of everything? My savings, my house? You can keep dreaming, mister. Kimberly hissed, her voice a low, dangerous growl, as she shoved Greg out the front door. The heavy oak door slammed shut with a finality that echoed like the lid of a coffin snapping shut. Greg stood on the sun-drenched porch, a pathetic sports bag clutched in his hand, containing little more than a pair of socks and a toothbrush. It was all he'd managed to grab, while Kimberly screamed, her face a hurricane, tossing his few belongings into the polished hallway. Just an hour ago he had felt like a genius, the master of his own destiny. An hour ago he'd had a plan. Greg had met Kimberly nearly 5 springs ago at the Haven, an exclusive wellness retreat nestled in the rolling hills just outside Santa Barbara. She was working with a renowned yoga instructor, her movements graceful and precise. Kimberly, a woman in her late 40s, exuded an effortless elegance, her posture impeccable, her nails perfectly manicured. A single visit to her salon would probably cost more than his monthly take-home pay. He'd pretended to focus on his core exercises on a mat across from her, covertly admiring her toned physique, reflected in the expansive studio mirrors. Kimberly Moore was the visionary behind Inner Radiance, a thriving chain of 12 luxury spas scattered across California. She drove a sleek obsidian black luxury SUV and wore a vintage sapphire and diamond watch that shimmered like a tiny constellation on her wrist. Greg Spencer, on the other hand, was a struggling freelance graphic designer, working out of a cramped studio apartment in a bustling city, and still making payments on his well-worn silver compact car. But Greg possessed something money couldn't buy, an innate charm and an intuitive knack for reading people. He sensed that beneath Kimberly's confident exterior, beneath the veneer of the successful businesswoman, was a woman profoundly weary of solitude. There was a subtle weariness in her precise movements, and a quiet hunger for genuine connection in her deep-set eyes, a longing Greg had learned to recognise years ago, back when he had briefly worked at a Lonely Hearts hotline during his college days. Their first conversation had started simply enough. He had asked if she could spot him on a tricky pose. Instead of a polite dismissal, Kimberly lingered. Greg spoke about holistic wellness with a passion that suggested it was his life's calling, though he'd only started coming to the Haven a month prior. He listened to her stories about building her empire with an intensity that made her feel as if she were revealing the very secrets of the universe. Most importantly, he looked at her not as a walking ATM, but as a woman. Kimberly didn't fall quickly. She was far too discerning for that. But steadily, a connection began to form. 3 weeks later, they shared coffee after a session. Another week passed, and they dined at a charming bistro where Greg nervously scanned the prices on the menu. A month after that, he moved into her spacious penthouse apartment in the historic heart of the city, with breathtaking views of the sparkling bay. 6 months later, she surprised him with a gleaming slate-grey luxury sedan, a thoughtful gesture so he wouldn't feel out of place driving to her professional events. A year after that, they exchanged vows at the Vineyard Estate, a magnificent countryside venue where the cost of a single reception hall rivalled Greg's annual income from his freelance projects. Greg truly believed he had stumbled into paradise. Breakfasts in bed, meticulously prepared by Kimberly's kind, elderly housekeeper, Mrs. Davison. Lunches at upscale bistros where the average check dwarfed his former weekly earnings. Vacations to idyllic Hawaiian beaches and charming European villages where he experienced business class for the first time and stayed in 5-star boutique hotels. A wardrobe filled with designer clothes Kimberly herself had chosen for him, with an almost maternal tenderness, picking out sizes and styles. He'd quit his freelance work under the noble guise of finding his true calling, enrolling in photography workshops, dabbling in interior design courses. In truth, most days he played on the state-of-the-art gaming console Kimberly had given him to de-stress after creative exploration, met friends at trendy downtown breweries, and posted photos of exotic cocktails on his social media. "You are my rock, my muse," Kimberly would whisper, gently massaging his shoulders after another arduous day of creative exploration. "Why burden yourself with trivial work? We have more than enough for both of us." She spoke with such genuine affection that Greg almost believed in his own exceptionalism. Almost. But somewhere deep down, a disquieting feeling began to fester. He wasn't a husband. He was a beautiful decorative object in a successful woman's curated collection. The first year he floated in a blissful haze. The second, he began to notice the subtle cues, how Kimberly introduced him at elegant galas. "My Greg, he's a creative soul." How waiters at exclusive restaurants always presented the bill to her. How taxi drivers would glance at her in the rearview mirror when asking for the destination. By the third year, he understood the bitter truth. He had become a kept man, a handsome accessory to a successful businesswoman's vibrant life. The turning point came at the 50th birthday gala for Kimberly's brother Robert, a prominent real estate mogul, held at the exclusive Harbourview Yacht Club. Greg sat at a sprawling table between his wife and her cousin, a sharp-witted business analytic, smiling and nodding politely while family members discussed intricate real estate deals, fluctuating market trends, and promising tech startups. The conversation revolved around new ventures in AI, blockchain projects promising astronomical returns. Robert recounted the recent acquisition of another sprawling shopping complex in the Hamptons. Kimberly shared her plans for opening a cutting-edge wellness resort in Sedona. Greg remained silent, his own maximum business experience being limited to selling custom website designs to small local businesses. He felt less like a partner and more like an art installation, admired perhaps, but ultimately inert. "And our dear Greg?" Kimberly's Aunt Jocelyn, a celebrated concert pianist and Kimberly's godmother, now the exacting head of a prestigious music academy, inquired with a tone that was more performance than genuine curiosity. "Is he still on his grand artistic pilgrimage?" "It's less a pilgrimage and more a continuous unfolding, Aunt Jocelyn," he responded, striving for a casualness his hammering heart betrayed. "The soul's true resonance isn't found, it's recognised." Yet a sharp pang shot through him as he met the collective gaze of the guests. Their unspoken verdict was clear: kept man, accessory, an expensive indulgence. Later, in the silence of Kimberly's electric sedan, her elegant hand settled lightly on his arm. "Don't mind Aunt Jocelyn, darling. She's always had a flair for the dramatic. Pure jealousy, that's all it is. That I have someone as vibrant as you." But her words, meant to soothe, only amplified the gnawing doubt. Greg began to dissect his situation with the dispassionate logic he had once applied to market analysis. The sweeping penthouse, over 1,400 square feet, with panoramic city views, was registered solely in Kimberly Moore's name. The sleek, charcoal grey luxury car, hers. Her investment portfolios, totaling over $1 million, were in her sole possession. Even the platinum credit card he used daily was an extension of her account. In the eyes of the law, he was a ghost, a beautiful spectre haunting someone else's opulent reality. He also noted a chilling shift in Kimberly's once adoring gaze. Where she'd once looked at him with the wonder of a child unwrapping a cherished gift, now her eyes held a different cast, possessiveness, tinged with a faint, almost imperceptible weariness. She cared for him as one cares for a prized imported sculpture, beautiful, new, and a perfect complement to one's curated life. Greg started to catalogue the small, telling gestures. How Kimberly would smooth his jacket before public appearances, as if he were a mannequin being readied for a display. How she'd introduce him as "my Greg," with the same proud lilt she reserved for "my new collection piece." How her phone seemed to vibrate with sudden importance whenever he began to share his latest creative spark. One quiet night, as he lay awake beside the sleeping Kimberly, he thought he heard her whisper, "The bedroom decor needs an update." For some reason, the phrase resonated with an unsettling chill, making him feel that more than just curtains and furniture were on her mind. Greg wasn't a fool. Despite years of expertly playing the part of the whimsical artist, his 3 semesters of law school, though incomplete, had embedded a crucial understanding. He knew if Kimberly initiated the separation, he'd walk away with nothing, perhaps a meagre spousal allowance if he fought hard, but certainly not a share of their shared life's opulent canvas. However, if he struck first, with a carefully constructed legal strategy, the landscape shifted dramatically. Marital property laws, in their state, he knew leaned in his favour. Anything acquired during the marriage, irrespective of whose name was on the title, was subject to equitable division. And with no prenuptial agreement, the path was clear. The multi-million-dollar penthouse, half its value could be claimed. Kimberly's burgeoning spa enterprise, which had expanded significantly since their vows, a substantial portion of its growth. The vehicles, the liquid assets, even the glittering jewels, all subject to division. Greg began to move with the meticulous planning of a chess grandmaster. He covertly used his phone to capture images of financial documents Kimberly left unattended. He quietly recorded their casual conversations about new investments, business expansions, and significant purchases. He spent hours in the quiet sanctity of his study, poring over complex legal precedents concerning high-value marital asset divisions. His paramount objective was to ensure Kimberly remained oblivious. Should she get wind of his intentions, she would undoubtedly liquidate assets, transfer funds to hidden accounts, or sell off business stakes for a pittance. The wealthy, he knew, had 1,000 ways to make their fortunes disappear. "Greg, you seem distant these days," she remarked one Friday evening over their usual candlelit dinner at the Portofino, their favourite Italian spot. "Lost in thought, and you're inseparable from that phone, even in the shower." "Just the weight of my creative pursuits, my love," he replied, carefully cutting into his delicate sea bass, his mind calculating the worth of the exquisite diamond pendant that now graced her neck, at least 90,000, if not more. "It's a heavy burden, finding one's true voice in this chaotic world." Kimberly offered a sympathetic nod, but Greg caught the searching glint in her eyes, a flicker of something he couldn't quite decipher. He forced a smile, but a cold dread began to coil in his gut. Had she sensed his treachery? fateful Monday, April 7th, Greg's meticulously prepared petition for the dissolution of their marriage and the equitable division of assets lay waiting in his briefcase. A silent declaration of war. He had even enlisted the formidable Miss Evelyn Reed, a sharp-witted family law attorney with 25 years of experience dissecting the most complex marital estates in the city. She was known for her unshakable composure and precise legal strikes. He had risen at 5:30 that morning, the sky still a soft grey, took a bracing cold shower, shaved meticulously, and donned his finest navy pinstripe suit. A thoughtful anniversary gift from Kimberly last year. At breakfast over steaming cups of artisanal coffee, he told his wife he was off to an early physiotherapy appointment for an old sports injury, followed by a collaborative session with a fellow artist on a new public sculpture commission. "Try not to linger too long, darling," Kimberly had murmured, her voice a silken thread, as she brushed a kiss near his ear. "Sarah and Tom are joining us for dinner. I'm quite excited to show them the new antique tapestry in the study." A vast, richly woven medieval tapestry worth over $50,000 had recently arrived and dominated the room. "Ah, tapestry," Greg thought, the bitterness a familiar tang on his tongue. Like every single thing in this grand house, it's definitely hers. At the courthouse, the procedure was astonishingly swift and impersonal. The clerk, a young man with tired eyes, processed his petition without a flicker of recognition. A date for the initial hearing was set for 6 weeks out. Greg felt a strange mix of relief and terror, as if he'd just ignited a fuse. There was absolutely no turning back now. But when he returned home just after lunchtime, all his careful machinations crumbled into fine dust. Kimberly sat at her sleek, ebonized oak kitchen table, a landscape of his printed emails, a small silver flash drive, and his open laptop spread before her. "Such compelling reading, Greg," she stated, her voice unnervingly level. The folder, titled Exit Strategy, was particularly illuminating. Greg's stomach lurched. His heart felt like a stone dropping through him. He had forgotten to log out. "Kimberly, I can explain what precisely?" she interjected, pushing herself gracefully to her feet. "How you spent the last quarter meticulously plotting to strip me bare? How you meticulously researched every legal technicality to claim assets that you contributed absolutely nothing to?" Greg saw the diamond-hard resolve in her gaze, the very quality that had allowed her to forge her multi-million-dollar empire from a single, humble boutique. "Did you honestly believe I was so easily duped?" What unfolded next, Greg would forever replay in his mind as a horrifying slow-motion reel. "Sit down, Greg," Kimberly commanded, her voice dropping to the chillingly precise tone she used when addressing underperforming spa directors. "Allow me to conduct a brief, impromptu seminar on advanced tactical planning." She swiveled the laptop, positioning the screen directly in front of him. On the desktop, a folder bore his name. "Module 1, Kimberly began, clicking open the first file. "Never, under any circumstances, underestimate your adversary, especially when that adversary built an empire from scratch in the cutthroat 90s, when every single deal was a bare-knuckle fight for survival." The fight was a meticulously compiled dossier on him, dated late September 5 years prior, almost a full month before their supposed chance meeting at the Haven. Greg Spencer, born 1982, Kimberly recited, her voice devoid of inflection, like an automated message. Education, 2.5 years at law school, withdrew for failure exams. Then 3 years of liberal arts at a state university. Marital status, single. Income, inconsistent, below poverty line earnings from speculative cryptocurrency trading. Debts, substantial student loans, multiple maxed out credit cards. The character is summarised as charismatic, adaptable, opportunistic tendencies. Greg stared, his vision blurring, feeling the solid ground beneath him dissolve. His entire adult life laid bare with chilling, German-like precision. Observe the timestamp. Kimberly tapped a polished nail against the document's upper right corner. Late September, when you were still scraping by, hoping for a lucky break, I already possessed a complete psychological profile of you. The next file contained a series of candid photographs. Greg outside his cramped apartment building, at a local diner, even jogging along a less trafficked city park trail. Someone had been surveilling him long before their paths supposedly crossed. Module 2, Kimberly continued, her voice gaining a cruel edge. Serendipity is a myth in high-stakes ventures. Our encounter at the Haven. I was fully aware of your membership. I knew your routine, your patterns, even the type of women you typically gravitated towards. She navigated to the next file, a comprehensive financial report detailing his non-existent income for the past 4 years. Legally, yes, you might be entitled to a portion of our marital assets. However, there's a crucial caveat. If one spouse has demonstrably failed to contribute to the marital estate without compelling reasons, the court holds the discretion to deviate from strict 50-50 division. Greg felt a cold sweat prickle his skin. 4 years of no meaningful income, Greg. No genuine attempts at securing gainful employment. It will be exceedingly challenging for you to convince a judge that your artistic journey was undertaken at my behest, especially when factoring in. She opened the subsequent folder. Photographs of Greg at trendy rooftop bars with his friends, lounging poolside at lavish resorts, designer cocktails in hand. The court will undeniably view you as a recreational dependent, a man who shamelessly exploited his wife's wealth and now seeks to seize half of her hard-won legacy. But that's merely the prelude, Kimberly added, a predatory gleam in her eyes. Do you recall our penthouse? Of course I remember our apartment with the bay view. Greg choked out, his voice raw. It was purchased by me long before our marriage, Greg, and it was never joint property. Kimberly cut him off, her words like a razor. And do you recall that luxury sedan you drove? The one registered in your name? Greg nodded, bewildered. It was purchased by me after our marriage, Greg, and paid for from my personal account. Kimberly continued, her words landing like blows. And though it was titled in your name, I will claim about our verbal agreement when you committed to repaying its full value should we ever separate or if it was sold. She paused, relishing his paling face. Now, about my business. The Inner Radiance spa chain. You probably assumed its value grew during our marriage, and you're entitled to half of that growth. Greg tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. You're mistaken, Kimberly said calmly. Every single dollar of profit earned these past years was immediately reinvested back into expanding the business. New locations, innovative equipment, staff training, acquiring other smaller companies. I never once withdrew dividends for myself as an individual, so they could be recognised as joint income. Thus, from a legal standpoint, the increase in business value is almost entirely due to my personal reinvestment and my labour, not joint marital effort. Proving your share in that will be exceptionally difficult. A few days later, standing on the sun-drenched marble steps of the grand entrance, clutching a flimsy grocery bag containing little more than a single pair of worn athletic socks, Greg finally grasped the horrifying truth. He had been outmanoeuvred, outplayed, irrevocably defeated before the game had even truly begun. Kimberly hadn't merely predicted his intentions, she had artificially orchestrated his very downfall. All those endless months of self-discovery, all the subtle encouragement to pursue his passions instead of a career, all the deceptively comforting reassurances that their marriage was a partnership of souls, not a cold contract. She had been diligently, ruthlessly building the irrefutable evidence against him. His phone vibrated, startling him. A text message from Kimberly. Your poultry belongings are safely stored at the public storage unit downtown. I'll forward the access details tomorrow. And Greg, next time, strive to understand the playing field more thoroughly. In matters of domestic law, as in any shrewd business venture, victory belongs not to those who merely know the rules, but to those who master the art of applying them. Greg slowly sank onto the cool stone steps, the California sun suddenly feeling cold against his skin. For the first time in over 4 years, a terrifying thought solidified in his mind. He would have to find a job, a real job. Inside the now silent, immaculately appointed penthouse, Kimberly poured herself a glass of crisp, pale rosé. She reflected that some life lessons, however painful for the recipient, were worth far more than any financial gain, and sometimes the most effective way to safeguard what was profoundly yours was to ingeniously allow your opponent the precise opportunity to expose their true predatory nature. She felt no anger, perhaps even a fleeting spark of detached pity for Greg. But pity, she knew, was a debilitating weakness when everything you had painstakingly built over decades hung in the balance. After all, she had always believed this core tenet. In business, as in life, there are the hunters and there is the hunted. And it was always irrevocably better to be the hunter than to be the prey, even for a single solitary day.